Attention deficit slash hyperactivity disorder, better known as ADHD, is a condition as misconstrued as it is powerful. What if I told you this condition is behind my creative brilliance? What if I told you that this particular condition is a superpower? My superpower. Howdy, folks. My name is James Victor, and I'm the host of the Suga Experience. And today we're going to be taking a deep dive into something very personal, something that you probably did not know about me. Heck, something I did not even know about myself until fairly recently, as recent as November last year. And we are going to be painting as we do that. I, however, have to give out a disclaimer though before we start. I am not good at painting whatsoever. I'm just following my therapist's advice into trying new hobbies, and this is one of them. I already prepped my paints and my canvas is staring right at me. And today we are going to do an abstract piece because I believe that clearly depicts how I feel having ADHD. It's like a whirlwind tornado up here, and that would be ideal for this particular project. So let's just get right into it. Folks, we are going back in time. Quite back indeed that our story begins over a century ago in the early 1900s. The earliest descriptions of what we now today recognize as attention deficit slash hyperactivity disorder, better known as ADHD, which is how I'm going to refer to this particular condition throughout the rest of the video because saying it in full is kind of tiring. The earliest descriptions of this particular condition date back to Sir George Steele in the year 1902 to be exact, who observed children with what he described as, and I quote, defect of moral control, where he described moral control as the ability to regulate one's actions in alignment with greater good, encompassing both societal norms and personal well being. George Steele identified several behaviors exemplifying this particular defect, and they include 1. Aggressiveness, where some children would display unprovoked hostility. 2. Is defiance, where some children would exhibit resistance towards authority figures like parents or educators. 3 is impulsivity, where some children would act without forethought or consideration of consequences. And 4 is dishonesty, which I will not be explaining further because I'm sure we are all conversant with what that is. 5 is emotional instability, where children would exhibit excessive emotional reactions disproportionate to the particular situations at hand. And last but not least is inattention, which I am unfortunately familiar with, where children would have difficulty maintaining focus in activities. One thing to note here is that Steele observed these particular patterns in some children with intellectual abilities that were normal, and therefore it does not mean that if you do have ADHD you are dumb or stupid. It just means, according to George Steele, that you, and I quote again, exhibit a defect of moral control. Well, there is no precise information that I could find regarding the first patient to be diagnosed with ADHD. The George Steele observations did lay a fundamental groundwork for understanding this particular condition and how it would evolve over the years. In the mid 20th century, however, behaviors that we now attribute to ADHD were labeled as hyperkinetic impulsive disorders or minimal brain dysfunction, and those historical labels evolved over time to what we now refer to attention deficit and hyperactivity disorder, basically ADHD. Over time, research has reshaped our view on this particular condition, transforming a once stigmatized label into a spectrum of neurodivergence with unique strengths and challenges. Before I talk about my journey with ADHD and my unexpected diagnosis, I feel we should first delve into ADHD is not just a behavior, it's rooted in our biology. My biology. Studies show that this particular condition has a strong genetic component up to 80%, which is very fascinating, by the way. When I came across this particular piece of information, I couldn't believe it. It legitimately shocked me. What it means in layman's language is that one or both of my parents do have ADHD, and it was genetically transmitted to me, which is Very fascinating when you come to think about it. So, how does this work, you might be asking? Well, the genes related to dopamine regulation, and if you're not conversant with what dopamine is, I highly suggest you go back to high school, you fucking twat. No, I'm just kidding. I'll actually explain it to you. Dopamine is a neuromodulator molecule that plays a very significant role in cells. It's an organic chemical that acts on areas of the brain that give you feelings of pleasure, satisfaction, and even motivation. It plays a huge role in controlling memory, sleep, learning, mood, and even concentration. So, the genes related to dopamine regulation, namely DR4D and DAT1, play a significant role in how our brain processes and rewards information. And therefore, if one individual has ADHD, it's more than likely that their offspring will also have ADHD. What does this mean for our brains, though? Research consistently shows and points to the differences in the prefrontal cortex, basically our control center, and impulsive regulations and other regions like the basal ganglia, which I'm not gonna lie to you, I did not know what the fuck that was. This and the cerebellum and the cingulate cortex are affected by the ADHD, and they impact everything from motor control, motor activity, and even emotional control. One excruciatingly important thing to note here is that these areas for neurotypical human beings interact like a finely tuned orchestra that would sound something like this. But for neurodivergent people, aka me with ADHD, all these signals are mixed up, and my orchestra will sound something more like this. Nothing is to worry though, because this is a fixable problem, and that is what we are going to be looking at in our next segment. When it comes to managing ADHD, there are no magic bullets. However, there are many tools. The mainstay of treatments includes medication, which I am on, by the way. I am currently taking a stimulant by the name methamphetamine. However, one key thing to note here is that there are different types of ADHD. It's not a one size fits all. The condition presents itself in the following major ways. One is predominantly inattentive, which is characterized by distractibility, disorganization, and forgetfulness, which is crazy. And two is predominantly hyperactive impulsivity, which is marked by excessive movement, erraticness, and difficulty in staying still. Then there's a third and final way, which is the category I fall under, and it's a combination of both, where one exhibits both a mix of inattention and hyperactivity as well as impulsivity. So, when it comes to medication, a person exhibiting the first condition, and that is inattentiveness, they get stimulants or even antihistamines, right? That work by enhancing dopamine signals. And for those exhibiting condition two, in this particular case, hyperactivity, they get non-stimulants like atoxamine. And medication, however, is just one piece of the puzzle. Behavioral therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, otherwise known as CBT, also play a huge role in helping individuals manage the symptoms. Each treatment plan is unique to the person using it, and obviously it's up to the person to find a suitable combination of both for their particular use case. As I stated earlier, I use a stimulant and I attend monthly therapy sessions to help me cope with this particular condition. I also have had to learn and unlearn a lot of stuff, by the way, but I will say that post my diagnosis, I am way better than I was before it. So I'm really glad that I did, get my diagnosis, however late it was, Um, with the right tools, ADHD is not a limitation. It's a different way of experiencing the world. And that is a quote that I need on a t-shirt. Folks, it seems we have gotten to the most important segment of my video, for me at least, because I love being the center of attention. And this is where I will talk about one thing that absolutely fascinates me till date is the fact that I've had this disorder my whole life and I only got to know about it like last year. So how I got my diagnosis is really fascinating when you come to think about it. Mid-November last year, I met someone who is no longer in my life because I ended up being a twat and a douchebag. Anyway, that's besides the point. I am getting a bit sidetracked. I'm sorry. So late last November, I planned a sleepover for 3 days and executed it. It ended up being very fun and lasted 3 days, so Friday through Sunday. And something that really fascinated me is when I came back home, I was really moody. I was having a full blown meltdown, and I'm not proud to admit this, but I was crying uncontrollably, and I knew something was amiss. I was very concerned, of course. I ended up going to a psychologist, and the psychologist later, referred me to a psychiatrist who did not even take 30 minutes to decipher my case. And I ended up being told that I have ADHD, which is crazy. I ended up telling the psychiatrist a couple of things about my childhood and whatnot, and she diagnosed me with ADHD as well as anxiety. This shocked me because I thought I had a mood disorder, but turns out I did not have a mood disorder, which brings me to yet another very important, quite fascinating thing, yet frustrating, about ADHD. Some of the disorders' characteristics tends to overlap with other disorders, and in this case, conditions like depression, bipolar disorder, mood disorder, and even sometimes anxiety. Many individuals with anxiety, ADHD, myself included, experience emotional dysregulation, impulsivity, and even mood swings. And this can mimic other symptoms. And it's really important to just, get a comprehensive diagnosis because you might not be having a mood disorder. You might just have ADHD, which is really fascinating. Think of ADHD as a roller coaster. There are highs and lows, and for ADHD, it's quite sudden. And this might be confused with other common disorders. Anyway, this revelation was very surprising for me, but very liberating, because every flaw that I long struggled with became part of this larger, more intricate like picture, and I viewed my obstacles as sparks of creativity and innovation in my life. I have come to embrace every part of myself, every part of my neurodiversity, my ADHD, and I view my struggles and strengths and challenges differently now. This is my truth, and I believe that many of you having watched this will, be empowered. And I hope that sharing my story, you too can find empowerment, in your own unique wiring. We are all so different, and that's what makes us very unique. And thank you for joining me, honestly, on my deep dive into ADHD and this very complex situation. I never expected to get this particular diagnosis. It's been a revelation. It's been the best thing to happen in my life. And I am really, really happy that I talked to you about this and this particular video. I'm having fun, honestly, and that's all that matters, I clearly hope that this helped someone. Thank you for joining me in this particular journey. I had fun painting, and always remember to embrace your uniqueness because that is your superpower. Anyway, I'm done with my painting, and here it is. I don't know how this looks, honestly. I really like it though. Um, Bye and take care. Honestly, wow, that actually did fall. It's like right on time, at the end of the video. But hope you liked it. Honestly, see you next time where I'm going to be talking about anxiety. I love you.